Welcome to Time+Tide's leafy criminal lair in Melbourne, Australia. My name is Andrew McCutcheon. I'm the founder of Time+Tide and the host of today's discussion, which is regarding the journey of the Code 1159. And I can tell you from experience, it's always a good day when it includes a discussion with Michael Friedman, the head of complications at Audemars Piguet, and also for the first time, Luca Raggi, the research and development director at Audemars Piguet. Gentlemen, welcome to this discussion.
Pleasure, Andrew. Great to see you as well. It's a good day for us when we can touch base with Time+Tide on the other side of the ocean and have a quick hello with you.
And last time we did this, it was very loose and very live. We were on a Zoom call. We are on a Zoom call again today, but we've stepped things up. I feel like we're just a cut below CNN today. So I think we keep it even more classy and professional.
We went a little 2.0. We got some better camera, some better sound gear this time. So let's see how we roll.
Excellent. Well, look, today we are talking about the Code 1159, which is a collection that, whether you know watches or don't, this has found a way into a lot of dialogues, a lot of conversations, and this is not uncommon for Audemars Piguet collections. So I thought today, gentlemen, we would start with the ways that the Code 1159 journey has been similar and different to, I'm going to specifically isolate 4 collections: the Royal Oak collection, the Offshore collection, and the Concept collection. Tell me, gentlemen, to begin with, how does this journey feel the same to the way those collections rolled out over time, starting in 1972, and how are they different?
All right, Andrew, I'll start with that one, if that's cool with you, Luca. So as you recall from previous conversations, everything was unique at AP up until 1951. Reference numbers were only introduced in 1951, so duplicates only begin at that point. Between 51 and 71, we were creating models, but in very small quantities. And as you know the story well, the early 70s was the dawn of the quartz era or quartz crisis. And the high-end companies were starting to look at different pathways, different venues, looking at ways that people were wearing watches in a more modern context, in a more contemporary way. And all of that was part of the fuel that drove the Royal Oak. What made the Royal Oak distinctly different in 1972 was, of course, the material, hand-finishing steel in such a way. And all of that labor, all of that work resulted in a high price point.
Sold for around $3,000 when it was first released in 1972. And this was considered both by the industry and by the general watch buying public as just a piece of inexplicable insanity.
But the other big differential were the quantities. Audemars Piguet hadn't produced an individual model in such quantities in that way. And on top of it, the design, the form, the materials, everything was something that had never been seen before in such a way. Steel watches had existed, but never in such a complex architecture and geometry with such a refined bracelet. And you know the story well. It was met with major controversy in 1972, but it also found its fan base quite early on as well. It took a while to take off in the broader sense because it took a while for production to ramp up and for the watch to start to evolve. The first variation of Royal Oak didn't occur until 76 with the first women's watch, and then the gold models come in 77, and the complications don't arrive until 84 with the perpetual calendar, and much longer, as you like to point out, for the chronograph. So the Royal Oak journey follows something along that trajectory. And then a few years later, after those perpetual Royal Oaks debut, in comes the Royal Oak Offshore, coming in 1993. Different designer, not Genta, this time it's Geit, but also met with very, very similar controversy in that regard. Many people felt it was a manipulation, it was a bad interpretation of the original classic. Others viewed it as being part of the...
An exaggeration.
Yes.
I found that, to even have the original founder of the Royal Oak saying, take the Royal Oak name off this collection. It's an exaggeration of my design proportions. Learning this just really gave me a flashback to 2 years ago when again, there's this sense of outrage and shock and awe when AP do something what is considered in that moment in time to really turn the tables.
Well, usually at those moments in time, it's also part of a broader cultural dialogue taking place. I mean, the early 90s was the era of extreme. Everything was getting big, loud, more aggressive, more overt. The Offshore was part of that broader dialogue. And in between this and Code, we of course had the debut of the Concept in '02. which was really the first 21st century watch design. What I mean by that is the deconstruction of the traditional approach to building a watch and overtly borrowing ideas from high technology sectors and other sectors and integrating that into the watch, which only began as complications and remained as complications to this day. But I was already well in the industry in '02 when the concept came out. At the time, I was head of Christie's Watches out of New York and already quite close with AP. And I remember, we talked about this a little bit with Ku in the previous session, it was not met very, very well by a lot of traditional collectors. And it too took a while. And this is where we arrived at with Code 1159, another decade and change after that point, going back to 2019, where whenever a new form language is introduced into this business, not just from Audemars Piguet, but from any company really, a new form language trying to do something different can always be met with some people who love an approach and some people who are going to challenge that or question it. And that's perfectly understandable and that's perfectly okay. It's a track record that we've been on for a long time. And again, the history of unconventional design language, this is what AP has always done, because different shapes and different angles and different edges become the platform for the hand finishers. So Audemars Piguet requires complex cases to do what we do best. And that's those hand finish elements which give it that character and that human touch.
Speaking of what you do best, and speaking of the people within the company, I'd love to know when you joined the story, because I'm so glad you told that anecdote about Christie's, because it felt to me like you were heading in one path even in '02, and that was towards the company, because you got it, man. You, like, other people might have had, because I mean that first, like we talked about in the previous video, that first concept model still looks futuristic. And how many years later are we? You know, this is it's 20 years later. And still this watch looks like it's from the future. You two have formed a very powerful and important nexus and symbiosis within the company. I've given you a huge ramp up now, so I hope you can go with me on that energy, but please tell me about how you joined the story, at what point you joined, and what does your union mean, and how does that work?